Alright guys, in this video we're going to talk about backgrounds and borders, and I'm going to use the full screen editor and full screen browser because I want to utilize all the space here. Now notice that I have a folder called IMG. This is an image folder, and I have two images. One is a stars.jpg file, which is this image here. I'm going to use as a background, and then I have a leaf.png, which you can't really see because it's transparent and it's on a dark background. Now, one thing to remember is JPEG files or JPEG images, they can't be transparent, okay, like this one is. PNG files can have a transparent background where you can put it on any web page, like let's say the web page is a red background and it will show red behind this image. If it were a JPEG, it would have to have a solid color. It couldn't be transparent. So just remember that. If you want transparency, then use a PNG image. Alright, so what we're going to do now is create a file called 05_backgrounds_borders.html. And let's put in our boilerplate here. And for a title, we'll say backgrounds and borders. Let's add in our style tags. And as far as the HTML goes, we're going to have 4 divs. So the first one is going to have an ID of box-1. Okay, so you want a div with the ID of box1. We're going to put in H3 and just say box1 for the title. And we want a paragraph with, let's say, 20 words. So we'll do lorem 20. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is just highlight this whole div, and I'm going to copy it down with Shift Option or Shift Alt on Windows, and then we're going to hit the down key 3 times. So now we have 4 divs, and then we're just going to change the ID. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And then we'll change the text as well. And we'll probably use this HTML in a couple different lectures. That's 3 and 4. Okay, so let's save this and let's open it up with Live Server. And it should look like this. Okay, so we have our 4 divs. And we're going to style the first one. So let's go back and let's target the ID of box1, and we're going to use the background. Oops, if I spell background right. We want to use the background color property. Now, when you want to assign a color to text, obviously we use the color property. We've already talked about that. If you want to style the background or color the background, you use background color. And I'm just going to choose this Blanche Almond. Doesn't really matter what color we use. But if I go ahead and save this and we take a look, notice that this whole div now has that background color. Okay, and it's going to take up however much space that the element takes up, or the div. And remember, divs are block level, so this is going to go all the way across by default. Okay, unless we set a width on it or something like that. And I know the text is right up against the edge. That's because there's no padding. I'm going to go over margin and padding in a lecture very soon. So let's head back into our editor here, and I want to go over border. Okay, now border has 3 mandatory properties. So the first one is going to be width, and this can be in any order, but we're going to do width first. So let's say 3 pixels. Now if I just do that and take a look, we have nothing. There's no change because we need all 3 properties. The next one is going to be the color. So we want to say border dash color, and let's just do red. And then the last one is going to be border style, which can be dashed, dotted, double, groove. The most popular is going to be solid. That's probably the most common that you'll use, which is just a solid regular border. So let's save that and let's take a look. And now we have a 3 pixel wide red solid border. Okay, and just to give you an idea of some of the other styles, we can do like dotted. If we take a look at that, that's the dotted border. And what else? We have dashed. That's dashed. It's similar to dotted, but they're wider lines. But for the most part, you're probably going to be using solid the most. Now, using all 3 properties like this, we don't have to do it this way, and this isn't the preferred way. What we can do is just use the single border property, and we can actually add all 3 of those in here. So 3 pixels, solid red, and it doesn't matter the order either. You can use any order. And if I comment this out, I'll highlight this and do control / or control ? That'll comment that out. If I save with Control S and take a look, we have the same thing. Okay, so this is the exact same as doing this. It's just less lines of code. Okay, so that's border. Let's say we want to do just a border on the top. Actually, you know what? We'll grab the next one. Let's do box 2. And let's actually give this a background. Now we can also use just background if we want to add a color or a background image, which I'll get into in a second. But let's give this a dark background, and let's give it a color, a text color of white. Oops. And let's say we just want a border on the top. We can just do border dash top, and let's say we want to do blue solid 3 pixels. Okay, so if we save that and we take a look, now we just have a border on the top. So you can do border top, border bottom, border left, and border right. All right, so now I want to take a look at the border radius property, because by default our corners are just straight corners, but we can round it off if we want. So I'm actually going to comment out the border top, or no, I'll leave it. But what I do want to do, is just add a line break between these two, box 1 and box 2. There we go. So let's say that this top one here, I want rounded corners. So for that I would use a border radius. So I'm going to go to box 1 and I'm going to say border radius. And we can put percentages here, we can put pixels. Let's say 10 pixels, that's pretty common. And if we take a look, now we have rounded corners. Now before CSS 3, there was no border radius property. We actually had to create little images of corners, rounded corners, and then position them perfectly so that it looked rounded like that, which was a huge pain in the butt. And if you're just learning HTML and CSS now, you missed a lot of crappy stuff that we used to have to do before HTML5 and CSS 3. Just to let you know that. Now, if we wanted to just add rounded corners to, like, let's say the top, we can do that as well. So let's take box 2 and let's say border dash top dash left dash radius. I know that's a long property. And let's say 10 pixels. So if we take a look at that, notice that only the top left is rounded. Okay, so we can choose which corners we want to round. And let's say we just want the whole top, so we'll just copy this down and we'll do right as well. Alright, so now if we look at that, both of the top is rounded. Now you don't even have to have a border property to use border radius. Like, we could still round the bottom edges even though there's no border. Okay, so that doesn't matter. So next thing I want to look at is the background image property. Okay, a lot of times you might want to have some kind of image as your background. So let's use box 3 and let's use the background dash image property. So this is going to actually take in URL, and in here we could use a remote image, like we could do HTTP and then locate some image on the internet and use that. But what we want to do is target the stars.jpg file that's in our image folder. Okay, and since our image folder is local in our directory here, we can just do /, that represents the current directory. Then we want to go into the image directory, and then we want to call the stars.jpg file. Okay, so let's save that and let's go back and notice that it uses the background image. Now you don't see the whole image because it only takes up the space of the actual element. Okay, and this is the whole div right here. Now we can make this bigger by setting a height. We can set a height and a width in CSS. Let's also change the color of the text because it's unreadable right now. So we'll say color white, and let's give it a height of, let's say, 300 pixels, and let's give it a width of 600 pixels. And let's save that and take a look, and there we go. So now we have our background image. We have a width of 300 and a height of, width of 600 and a height of 300. So with background image, or I should say with background, you have a bunch of other properties, just like with border. One of those is background repeat. Now you can't see it here, but let's say this image was only like this big. okay, it ended right here, it would repeat both this way on the x-axis and this way on the y-axis. And usually you're not going to want that unless it's some kind of seamless texture that you want to repeat, like as some kind of seamless background. But for the most part, you're not going to want that. So let's go ahead and set the background dash repeat property. And there's a few options here. You can do repeat, which is the default. It repeats both ways. Repeat X will only repeat on the x-axis, which is horizontal. Repeat Y will go on the up and down, the y-axis. But what we want is no repeat, because we don't want it to repeat. Okay. Another property is the position property. So let's say background position. And this will move the image around. It takes in two values. The first is going to be the x-axis, and the second is the y-axis. So let's do 100 pixels. Let's just do 100 pixels 0 and see what happens here. So what happened is on the x-axis, it pushed it over 100 pixels, and it actually leaves a blank space here. Now, if I do 100 pixels on the y-axis, try to guess what's going to happen. So let's save that and take a look. And it pushes it down 100 pixels. Now let's say you wanted to move it up and over 100 pixels so that the image didn't actually get pushed out of its context here, or its wrapper. So let's go back, and what we can do is we can do negative values. So now if we take a look, what happened is the image went up 100 pixels and over this way 100 pixels. Now you also have keywords you can use like top, center, and bottom. So let's say we wanted to center and center on both axes. Okay, and you can see what it did is it just centered it. If I wanted to take the y-axis and move it up to the top, we could do that as well. And this might not be the best image to use as an example because it's just stars. It's not something that you can actually tell what position it's in. But just know that we can move it, you know, top, bottom, center, and so on. Now, in most cases, you're going to want the whole image to cover the background, and that's not what's going on here. It's the size of the image, which I believe is 1920 by 1080, so the image is really like this big. It's like the whole window. Now let's say we just want the whole image to show in this spot. What we could do is we could add a background size property, and we can set that to cover. Okay, so it's going to cover the whole space. So if we take a look now, the whole image is showing. It doesn't matter what size the image is. It's going to take up the whole space right here. All right, so that's a lot of different properties, right, for the background. There's even more than that, but let's say that we want to do exactly what we're doing here, but we don't want to take up all these lines with all these different properties. We can actually just use background. Okay, so I'm going to use background. I'm going to do the same exact thing we just did. So we're going to take the URL, and then after that we want the no repeat, and then after that we'll do the position. Let's do center. Let's just do center, center, and then when you want to put the size in, you just do a slash and then cover like that. So if I go ahead and comment this out and save and take a look, we get the same result with much less lines of code, much less properties. Okay, so let's move on. I want to look at having a fixed background, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's add in our box 4, and this time I'm going to set background. Now when you want to set an image, you don't have to use background image. You can use just background, even if you don't want to add all this other stuff we did up here. So let's do URL. And let's go in the current folder and then into the image folder, and we want leaf.png. Okay, and I'm just going to do a no repeat. All right. Now let's save this and see what we get. So notice that it's just because the image is bigger, like the image is this big, it's not going to show the whole image. It's only going to cover whatever the content area covers, which is this right here. So let's see. What I'm going to do is set. Actually, you know what we'll do is we'll add more content. So in box 4, let's take this paragraph and let's just copy it down like a bunch of times a lot. And save that, and now take a look, and now notice that it shows the whole image because the content area is bigger. If we manually set a height like we did here, we'd be able to see the whole image as well. But I want to show you how we can make this a fixed image. And to give you an example, let me just make this smaller so we have more of a scroll. Now if I scroll, see how the image just kind of stays in place? We can make it fixed. So let's go back up to box 4, and let's actually position it differently too. So let's do center bottom. Let's see what that looks like. So now see how it's center bottom. Let's do center center. Okay, so now it's dead center. Now I want it to stay fixed, so I'm going to add a background attached. I'm sorry, background attachment property. And let's say fixed. And let's save that. And now watch when I scroll. The image just stays in place, and it's fixed to the browser window. Okay, so if you want to do that, then you want to use the background attachment fixed. Alright, so that's going to be it for this video, guys. In the next one, we're going to start to talk about the box model, which has to do with margin and padding and just how spacing works in CSS.
Living life, every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days. Fuck me, I'm looking in the mirror, so foggy, but I've never seen clearer.